Right, back again. This is the next time I'm going to attempt to do this video. Right, I wanted to talk about the Tough Enough. If anyone who watched the WWF or is a fan of MTV, in 2001, the WWE introduced a show called Tough Enough, which was a reality-based show with the idea that you would take novices to an extent with very limited, and I mean very limited, training in wrestling. You have them on 10 weeks of reality based television, and then the person wins a WWE contract. Now, in comparison to that, the UFC had their own Tough Enough, which was called The Ultimate Fighter, and the purpose of this video is to look at the two. Now, if you look at Tough Enough, at the time, reality television was quite big. It was quite a big thing. And if you were on a reality television show, you were instantly popular. And this concept worked with Big Brother over here. I know you guys have the Real World in America, um, Pop Stars, Pop Idol, X Factor, programs like that. It created names. So the WWF decided to cash in on this at the time, and they had their own idea, Tough Enough, which was in conjunction with MTV. So they were trying to get the MTV audience and the reality television show audience. And it wasn't a bad idea at first. When you think about it, you get two more audiences, people get to know a little bit more about the wrestling business, and you get the ability to create stars. And if you look in the early days, Maven, who on number one, was very, very popular in his first year in the WWE. Chris Nowinski was the biggest, not the biggest heel, but he was over as a heel. Nidia was very popular for a time as the show was growing, because you got to know the personalities. You actually got to know the very real personalities of the people, and you saw some likable traits, and that helped get some people over. And then in number two, you had Linda Miles and Jackie Gator. And then in number three, oh, sorry, by the way, number two, Kenny King should have won that. Kenny King is now in Ring of Honor, by the way. So anyone who watches ROH, please, Kenny King is the guy. Anyways, I digress. And then number three was Matt Capitelli, and John Hennigan. Now, each season, these contestants would get very, very popular, but the problem, and this is the biggest problem with the model, was that you cannot teach a novice the wrestling business in the space of 10 to 11 weeks. Yep, they get over with the television audience, and there's so much momentum, and people want to see them on television, and it's like, yes, we want to see them. But the problem is, as soon as that show is over, you have to send them to developmental. That's what happened with Maven, although he was back on TV very quickly, but it was a hard thing to do because he really needed the time to develop. So it was hard to kind of cash in on the momentum that he had generated on the show. The same thing with Nidia, and here's how I prove this. My sister doesn't even watch wrestling, but she watched Tough Enough, and she became a fan of Nidia, of course. And she's like, well, when's Nidia going to be on TV? When's Nidia going to be on TV? And then Nidia wasn't on TV for a year, and then the interest is gone, and that's it. And that was a big problem with Tough Enough. The same thing with the next season. However, they picked the wrong winners in a way, because Linda Miles had no interest in the wrestling business, and she quickly disappeared. She came on as Shaniqua, and then, nothing really happened after that. It was just like she was just there. Jackie Gator was just kind of there. And then in number three, John and Matt became very, very popular, and people liked them, especially Matt Capitelli. But the problem was they couldn't cash in on the early momentum they had, because they had to send them back to developmental. And John didn't make an appearance on TV till 2004 as Johnny Nitro, and then they took him off television again because he still needed developing, and he didn't come back until he was a member of Eminem. And it's only now that he's as John Morrison where he is, and that was one of the biggest problems. And then they had Tough Enough number four, which Daniel Puder won, and The Miz was on, and that was the same thing. Daniel Puder actually was very popular, especially when you had the little thing with Kurt Angle. People got into Daniel Puder, but the problem was they couldn't capitalize on his popularity because he was green. didn't have enough experience, and they had to send him to developmental, and there it was, the momentum was squandered. They didn't do this concept afterwards, so it was just kind of forgotten about, although they talk about bringing it back, and allegedly this model is going to re-emerge with this WWE NEXT show. Now, compare that to UFC. The UFC at the time in the early 2000s was having financial troubles. It had only just been purchased by Zuffa and Dana White and the Fertitas, sorry, and they were still struggling financially. I know that the Ortiz and Shamrock fight drew money from them and got them some publicity, but they were still struggling. And then they looked at the idea of what Tough Enough was, took that idea and perfected the model. See, what they did and where the Ultimate Fighter succeeded, where Tough Enough failed, was that they didn't just take novices who had no idea. Because could you imagine getting a novice off the street and saying you've got to learn jiu-jitsu, wrestling, grappling, striking, kickboxing, and be ready to fight in 10 weeks? It's not going to happen. They needed time to develop. So the Ultimate Fighter was the big idea that actually, in a lot of ways, was responsible for the success of mixed martial arts and clearing up the stereotypes that people had of MMA. And it actually brought the UFC out of this dark period and has been hugely successful for them, because what they've been able to do is they brought in guys they've been watching and looking to bring in, but they've used this television show as a format to kind of get the television audience used to them, create attachments, fight professionally, and then they can capitalize instantly. And if you look at the success that the Ultimate Fighter's had, it's made stars out of Forrest Griffin, who became a world champion in the sport, Rashad Evans, who's getting very, who's very well known right now. Who else was there? Michael Bisping, who's a draw for this country now, and his star is growing and growing. It even revitalized the career of Matt Serra, who was on the comeback, and ended up becoming quite popular in 2007 after he beat George St. Pierre. Although it was hit and miss with guys like Matt Danzig, who hasn't had that much success. Then it also made stars in guys like Chris Lieben. The point is, you had guys who were ready. You didn't have to send them back to a camp and go, well, we'll use you in 2 years, and then we'll go back and the momentum squashed and no one cares anymore. They could cash in on it instantly, and you got to know the personalities. And not only did it benefit the guys coming up, it also helped create a renewed interest in some of the existing fighters and people that were in the company. Whereas Al Snow became quite popular on the Tough Enough show, they did absolutely nothing with him. So it was like, well, where's Al Snow? There's nothing there. Whereas with the Ultimate Fighter, it helped generate interest in the Couture Liddell fight. It helped generate interest in Ortiz and Shamrock, in, oh gosh, Quentin Jackson and Rashad Evans, in Mir and Nogueira. That model has worked so successfully, and this is why I think this is one of many reasons why the UFC in particular has surpassed what professional wrestling should have been. And I feel that they have taken some of this professional wrestling model and perfected elements of it without straying away from what they really are, a sport. And it's interesting now that the WWE apparently want to do this NEXT idea. I know Truth Slayer did a video out there saying that he felt that the Tough Enough concept was good, but I was against what he said, because I felt that what I've just said before is you can't teach someone the business in 10 weeks and then expect them to be able to wrestle live on television and live on pay-per-view. They're going to be exposed. So it would have been a better idea actually if Tough Enough, like the Ultimate Fighter, took people they were looking at anyway on the indie scene, guys like a CM Punk or Samoa Joe or Bryan Danielson or Brian Kendrick at the time, who were indie guys who they were looking at, and I think some of them were under contract to, putting them on this television program, and then you could be able to cash in on them. And then people will go, oh, well, there's only 2 people who are going to win. What about the others? So what? It means there's more, those guys who've been exposed can now go in the indie scene or go elsewhere, and that helps them. It helps make the wrestling business a tiny bit bigger than it is. And I thought that's where they went wrong with it. I mean, everybody's benefited from the Ultimate Fighter in some way, shape, or form. People have become stars with the UFC or outside of the UFC. Anyways, this is quite a quick video. I'm going to do another video based on this. In fact, this is going to be a series of videos that I'm going to be doing called the MMA versus pro wrestling, because my channel more is going to be about the two and why I see similarities between the two, and also why I think one is surpassing the other. So guys, let me know what you think. And by the way, all those guys, check out Ring of Honor, some of the latest shows on ROH Brazil. Fantastic channel, fantastic wrestling. And I shall see you very soon. Take care.